by hook or by crook, but then when he doesn't succeed in his effort, finally she decides to part with it, because when she sees that people have started avoiding him, avoiding to avoiding, it was a social boycott sort of a thing, where when people come to know that he had tried to steal Binya's umbrella, people could not forgive him, and they decided that they'll now socially boycott him. So they stopped going to his shop, and he was in a very bad state, because that was the only source of income for him. But Binya was kind-hearted. She was so compassionate that she couldn't bear to see him suffer like that. And the suffering of Ram Bharosa brings about a transformation in little Binya's heart, and she decides to give the umbrella. We also find that she's very swift and sure-footed in while she's chasing Rajaram. That shows how confident she is about herself, though she's just a 10-year-old child. Her compassion is something very exemplary. None of the villagers or grown-ups, the elderly people in the village, ever felt sorry for Ram Bharose for having tried to steal Binya's umbrella. But it was only Binya who felt, compassion towards Ram Bharose, and her kind of compassion is something which is exemplary, and it is worthy of emulation. You also find that it's only Binya who had the ability to forgive, and it is said that to forgive is divine, and this divinity could be seen in little Binya. Now, Binya's empathy towards Ram Bharose is something which is a lesson that we learn through this story. Now, when the entire village turned against Ram Bharose, it is only Binya who stood by Ram Bharose and helped him. We look at her older brother, Biju, a typical boy with a lot of, he's mischievous. He's 2 years older than Binya, but he's not as matured as Binya is. It's Binya who looks after the major chores of the house, whereas Biju goes to school. There's an incident in the story where it is mentioned that he had knocked a beehive which was there on the oak tree, and he disturbed the beehive, and all the bees had stung him from all the sides. It was a very painful experience with which Biju had undergone, but as a result of which he had become immunized for life by the bee sting. He's a very protective big brother to Binya, as you see. It's a very sweet sibling love that you can see between Binya and Biju. Because, while he's returning from school, he's very hungry. This itself shows how the people in how much of hardships that they go through in this area, that he had not had anything for his breakfast. So while he was returning from school, he was hungry. And again, he finds a method of survival. Those are the kingora berries, which were there in the bushes. He would just pluck them and kept eating them and he had filled his pockets with these kingora berries. And when he comes home, he gives it to his sister. He offers it to his sister. So it also, the author here, Ruskin Bond tries to talk about the brother-sister love, the sibling love that is very clearly shown here. You will find that he deals with Binya with a lot of love, and you don't find, other than small brother-sister fights, you don't find any major fights between the two. They're very loving children. there is he gets wet and then he shelters in the caves while returning from the school. These are some of the incidents where Biju is highlighted. He is not worried that he got drenched in the rain. The only worry for him was the books that he was carrying, because he was returning from the school, and so he takes shelter in the caves in order to protect the books. You will find the protective elder brother chasing Rajaram, and which is followed by a scuffle with Rajaram. There is a fight between Biju and Rajaram, and though Rajaram was taller and heavier than him in the physique part, but he manages to get hold of the umbrella and ensures that he gives it back to his little sister. You'll find him to be a very boisterous character. He is liked lifting up large rocks. You can see him lifting up large rocks, and while he's lifting up those rocks, the scorpions underneath the large rocks get disturbed. So these are the kind of small mischiefs that Biju does, unlike Binya, who is more caring and who would not rather cause any harm to even the deadly scorpions. Now, Biju was offered a job at Ram Bharose's tea shop, which he refuses. So that is, again, that was a ploy by Ram Bharose to ensure that somehow he manages to, give him a job and then slowly manipulate and try and get the umbrella and try and own it. Like Binya, Biju also helps his mother with the ploughing and the transplanting of the rice seedlings. That you find this mention in the story. Now comes the antagonist of this story, that is Ram Bharosa. The trustworthy, you can see there's a question mark. Bharosa is a Hindi word which means to trust. Now, Ram Bharosa is a colloquial usage of where it says that Ram Bharosa is trustworthy, in the sense. So here I've put this question, is he really trustworthy? Because of all the troubles that he causes to our young Binya, he cannot be considered to be trustworthy. Now we look at Ram Bharosa and what he does for his livelihood. He owns a small tea shop on the Tehri Road. Now, it's exactly here that the buses and all come in. There's a bus stop where people come and get down, and they have tea at his shop. Apart from tea, he serves Coca-Cola, which is obviously not cold because there is no provision to keep it cold. There are no ice available to keep it cold. And then curd. These are the two things that he gives. Apart from that, there are a few chocolates and something to please the children who pass through his shop. And there are at different places where it says that he used to try and cheat these people, naive people, especially children, and he used to make money. A very miserly person. So he was the first person who spotted the umbrella in little Binya's hand, and he wanted to own it up so miserably that he tries all different kinds of mischiefs to possess it. Now, he's no less than the schoolmaster's wife or the pujari when it comes to being envious, right? So basically he's envious, and there's something common about these three characters, though the schoolmaster's wife or the pujari, they just have a passing reference in the book, but they all at some point of time wanted to own the blue umbrella. The human frailties are exposed here. We believe that children are are not pretentious. They need not pretend. But the adults that you find in the work, they are so pretentious that um, all the frailties, the weaknesses that you find in human beings are being exposed in this work. So basically, we are not talking about the other characters. Yeah, there's one more character, that is Rajaram, who plays a very negative role in this entire story uh, because of his greed to earn money, that he promises to steal the umbrella for Ram Bharosa. So these are the major characters that are there. So it is not characters where the focus lies. The focus lies on the settings. The focus lies on the life of these people who live in these areas. So the foothills of Himalayas, that is Himachal Pradesh, is the setting. The Garhwal region is the setting of is where the story is set. Now, streams you will find. What are the beautiful natural landscape that is being described by the author? So there are streams, there are pine forests, there are dark forests, there are lonely hilltops and brown hillside, because when the story is being narrated, there are also moments when the seasons change. So the season change is also uh, narrated to the readers through the change in the scenes around. So there is a green hill which turns brown later, fields rats. Then there are mountain cliffs with few stunned bushes, a wild cherry tree, thorny bilberry bushes, that is the kingora. It's a wild sour fruit which is known as kingora in that area. These are all very typical of that particular place. You will not find these things anywhere else. The thickets of nettles are there. You will find that in the settings, they clearly mention about the dusty metalled Tehri road. There is also the mention of the mode of transport which is used by the local people of that region. So once in a while there is a bus that would come, and then there would be a lot of people who would get on. But usually they use mules. They ride on the mules and they travel, and the rest of the people would walk. You'll find the description of a picturesque monsoon in this novella in chapter number 4, where it talks about the lush green hills, because when the monsoon sets in these hilly regions, how it looks. There are ferns on the walls, there are tree trunks, there are giant lilies, white mist floating up from valleys, leeches, snakes, slippery pine needles, orange and purple. Mushrooms are there, which are very poisonous. It is mentioned there. There are porcupine quills, the magpies, bulbuls, and other birds. These are all part of the description of the landscape. Early October, you'll find when the monsoon comes to an end, the leeches which were there during the monsoons have disappeared. And then the ferns that were green would turn yellow, and the mellow and golden sunlight on the green hills, like the limes in the lime tree, the warm and gentle breeze of October, snowy Himalayas, the bear's claw, which Ram Bharose makes a pendant and gifts it to her in exchange for the umbrella that she had gifted. The shorter days of the winter, all these things find place in the story. There are different themes that are discussed here. The real India is something which is depicted here. It's a divided India, actually. It talks about the rural-urban divide, the lifestyles, the people, and their morals. The moral value is the strength of the novel. There is a story of the good versus evil, as you find. The hardships of the people in the hills are being discussed at length. Aroma of the hills is, finds place in the novella. The goodness begets goodness. That's the moral of the story. So because of her goodness, there is a transformation in the wicked Ram Bharosa, and he becomes a good gentleman. Transformation of an elderly. There are other issues which also the author would like to discuss. There are subtle references of environmental issues owing to the influx of the tourists, which is a major concern of the author. How the ecosystem safeguards the inhabitants of this region, which is also discussed. The conflicting situations are between Ram Bharosa and Binya and Biju versus Rajaram, rural and urban, these conflicting situations, good versus evil. Now, when we look at the conclusion, you'll find that umbrella is a focal point of the novella. A lot of mundane happenings of the small town is being depicted. The story is almost biblical because, the perfect Eden where all coexist. That's an idyllic village which is being described at the beginning. But then the blue umbrella comes as the temptation, right? Like the apple in the biblical story. Picture of an alternate world for the urban to ponder upon. So we have to think about an alternate world here. There is a picture of the alternate world. There's something different from the urban world that you and I are aware of probably. The picture of an alternate world for the urban to ponder upon. Rajaram, the serpent, he is the serpent here of the biblical story, who tries to cajole Ram Bharosa to commit the sin of stealing, and as a result of which he is punished, and he loses the love and respect of the villagers, of his fellow beings. And finally, Ram Bharosa is banished because he is being totally boycotted by the villagers. You'll find that the forgiveness and generosity of Binya redeems him. And this is something, a lesson that we need to learn. Heaven and hell both are seen on earth. The most important line uttered by Binya, I quote, "But an umbrella isn't everything. There are so many other things in this life. Umbrella is not everything." And therefore, she is willing to partake with umbrella. She is willing to give it just for the joy that she found on Ram Bharosa's face. The message is virtue of giving and sharing undoes a lot of negativity. So there's a strong message that no matter the world could be bad, but you be good to the world, and then that negativity will fade away, and then